So today the concern is experiments. Now, experiments are very close related with method of science, as how do you test something works or not is by checking on the cause and effect of it. You do this, this happens. You do this, this happens. And then you see, okay, if I do this, will this happen? And if I do this, what will happen? Yeah. So there is a testing, experimenting. Now that is one of the phase of an adolescent way of doing things. That is, you learn a few things and then you test it out on different ways to see what all works, what are all the variations. There's something much lost in experimenting, because experimenting comes after the fact that something has happened, and then you're experimenting to retrace on what happened, to see how did that happen. Now if you're going to approach life beginning with an experimentation, you're going to already miss out on something. Now this is something which I learned during my training in BCST, which is biodynamic craniosacral therapy. And one of the things I learned there is every time I try to see what happens when I do this, something other than what I expect happens. And that is a learning. I get to see, okay, there is also this variations, but it's about what happens with that person, with that which I'm studying, what effect it has on the person on whom I'm observing something. And I'm saying, okay, if I do this, this will happen. What happens to that person who is at the receiving end of this observation? It's not an observation. It's more like, like a guinea pig. Okay, you're testing out on something. And that thing happens to be a living person in real time who's going through changes at that moment in time and has a different experience, if not for that experiment. So what I have learned is, rather than approaching life from an experimenting point of view, to observe what is, and the observation to inform, rather than testing out something and the consequent observations to be the conclusion, to give rise to conclusions. Rather, it's called the Heisenberg principle. What you observe changes subtly because of the fact that you're observing it. It's something that you can look up on Google, but that's what it says. What you observe, well, it's a kind of gist of it. What you observe subtly changes because of the fact that you're observing it. So instead, to be an observer of phenomena, rather than observing, okay, if I do this, this happens, instead of approaching it that way, to see, okay, this is happening, where might this be coming from? And it's sort of like a back and forth observation. You're looking at the components of what is seen now, rather than saying, if I do this, this happens. In which case you might be missing out on several parts that is already there. And going by, if I do this, this happens, is an experimenting point of way of approaching life. And you miss out on a lot of things, like I've said. Instead, to see, okay, this is there, what may be giving rise to this? So you're not changing something, you're only looking at, it's more like being a witness to something. It's like you're watching a game of football or something. Okay, let's say with a game of football, you're observing, okay, somebody's kicking a ball, and then you're like, where is this ball coming from? And then after kicking, where does this go? You're not saying that, okay, if this person kicks like this, the ball is going to go like that. You're saying this person kicked like this, and hence the ball went like that. You're not causing it, you're observing it, that this happened. And then you're seeing, where did the ball come from? It's more like you're literally that, you're observing something. And then by doing that, you're observing the components of it. You're appreciating what is by observing what all there is to it. And this is a nice way of by which to not only not change something by the fact of you observing it. So that goes beyond the Heisenberg principle, where you're not changing something because you're observing it, but well, you would slightly be doing that. But when you keep doing the same thing over a period of time, you're likely to come to a general set of permutations and combinations of what is possible from observing something. Even if something is changing, over a period of time, if you're observing the same thing, you're likely to see that a set of variables that can come about. And then from there, you'll arrive at a greater set of, okay, only so much variations is possible. And now what may be the other variations from what you observed. So it's a scientific way of doing things, but it's more based on observation rather than by experimenting, which is when you are likely to induce change, which would not have been there if you hadn't been experimenting. Now, why am I saying all of this? Well, in our everyday lives, when we get to know people, how do we get to know people? Do you do something and then say, if I poke this person like this person is likely to react in all these ways, and hence this person is? Or do you say, okay, these are all the ways that this person is. You're appreciating what is from without changing something, but you're being in the presence of. So it could be a person, it could be a topic you're inquiring into, say the topic of the soul. Now, this may seem really bizarre because a lot of people have either not ever heard of the word, or even if they've heard of it, they have no idea what it means. And if they know what it means, it's largely a presumed idea of what it means. And well, there are so many aspects to it. So something which you've never heard or you don't know about, instead of poking into it, to gently be in the presence of it and appreciate what might that be. It could even be something as a pen. Instead of presuming to know what the pen is or a mobile phone is, to be in the presence of it and allow for that object, that topic, that idea to inform in its own time, in its own way. Maybe you, the observer, is not ready enough to receive all that topic, that object has to offer. And hence, maybe you need to develop enough to have a container which can accommodate for what this object, this idea, this topic really has on hold. Yeah? So try and approach life this way. I dare say you're likely to be very profoundly affected, very profoundly touched by where you are, who you are. Where is this place called reality? What is this thing called life? And I dare say you would have a very richer experience of life than you would through any other way. Keep being curious, keep being childlike, observing life in a certain innocence, in a certain curiosity, and discover this wonderful place that we are in, and by reflection, and consequently to observe who you are and what may be the real wealth that has you be you. Thank you for being curious enough. Thank you for listening.